Well, good evening, IFL Nation, and welcome in. Now that I have confirmed that my microphone is on this time around, I want to warmly welcome you aboard to tonight's show. It is 8 p.m. over here in the East Coast, and despite the fact that we are delayed once again by a day, it does not change the fact that it is Wager Wednesday in the Indoor Football League. Thanks again for tuning in to find out a little bit more about what's going on in this great league. We'll recap the week that was, the week that is to come, and everything in between. We have a special guest joining the show in a little bit. You will not want to miss it. For those of you who are new to the IFL or to my channel, I want to welcome you aboard. My name is Alex Schuberth. I am a lead IFL contributor for Sports Coast to Coast. They are a Pacific Northwest-based sports forum site that specializes in the coverage of the IFL and its member teams specifically. From up-to-date game rosters to game previews, recaps, and other analysis, Sports Coast to Coast is your go-to destination for all things indoor football league. So definitely check it out. I've got a URL in the description where you will also find my written version of this post. So, without further ado, let's get into the meat and bones of today's show. So we have made it. We are in week 3 of the 2025 IFL season. So week 2 was one for the ages. There were a lot of ups, a lot of downs for both ourselves with our predictions, as well for the teams around the league. We ended up pushing overall from a win-loss standpoint, 3 wins and 3 losses. I've got some quick game recaps down there. We'll go into more details on those in just a little bit. So we'll recap the games, recap our results, see how they stack up with our season-long totals, by which, of course, I mean how does it compare against week 1 at this point. But we'll take a look at the season-long tracker, figure out, which teams, what trends are happening, and which ones could we look at and potentially capitalize off as we make selections going forward. I'll have a special guest come in and offer some neat contributions that he's been working on in terms of finding out how this year's results compare to past years. So stay tuned for that. Once we go through all of it, we're going to chart the course for week 3. We've got 5 games, 1 Friday, 1 Saturday, and 3 on Sunday. We'll make our primary pick for each game, and from there, we will go into our 3-leg parlay attempt. And this week is going to be a revenge tour. So week 2, what exactly happened? Well, we had a couple of games on Friday night. They both occurred at the same time at 7 p.m. Eastern, but we'll go with the top game on that list first with the Quad City Steamwheelers facing off against the Massachusetts Pirates, 1-0 versus 0-1. And unfortunately for Massachusetts, the story was much of the same that it was the week prior when they fell to the Jacksonville Sharks. The offense under Kenji Behar still struggled to get any momentum, despite the fact that they did much better with taking care of the ball. There were still just too many empty possessions. Even with 3 takeaways on defense, Quad City was able to get just enough throughout the course of the game to kind of keep themselves a step ahead throughout the majority of that contest. They get a big kick return touchdown with a few minutes left in regulation that really put themselves over the top. And they end up prevailing, advancing their record to 2-0 for the first time since 2019, taking the cake 37-33. Our pick of Massachusetts straight up faltered on us. The other game in week 2, the Iowa Barnstormers, brand new look. Hopefully for the fans out in Des Moines, a brand new team. Tough opening test against the Green Bay Blizzard at home, coming off that tough loss to the aforementioned Steamwheelers. And I'll say it, Iowa played a really, really good game. In fact, they held the lead in the third quarter, albeit by 2 points, but I'm not sure if anybody had Iowa honestly leading that game in the first place. I sure didn't. But Iowa was up 33-31 in that game. The Blizzard, they made a bunch of plays in that early stage of the second half. They ripped off a 21-0 run, but Iowa was not done. They got a touchdown in the dying moments of regulation right before the 1 minute warning. They were able to recover an onside kick, and unfortunately for us, did get a touchdown to make that margin of defeat just 5 points, barely crossing over the number by the hook that we needed. In the end, the Blizzard ended up winning 52-47. The 5-point margin, as we mentioned, not enough to cover the 5.5-point spread. So that was our second loss on Friday and an early bad beat of the year candidate. So I'm sure we'll have a handful more of those as the season goes along, but I don't know, man. Games involved with Blizzard seem to be bad beats for me, but what can you do? Saturday, we had one contest. It was the inaugural game for the Fishers Freight, the new team in the IFL, going up against the Northern Arizona Wranglers, who played relatively impressively considering their current standing in the coaches poll, where they were actually ahead 21-13 at the half. But then Fishers came to life on both sides of the ball. Jaya Wright, 100 yards rushing from the quarterback position. The Fishers defense actually outscored the Wranglers offense 14-8 or 12-8, I should say, in that second half, thanks to a pair of pick sixes, including one to salt away the game on Northern Arizona's final meaningful possession. The end result is an expansion team getting a win in their first time out. So congratulations to the Freight on their 41-29 win over the Wranglers. We needed that game to stay under 84.5. We stayed within that margin by 2 full touchdowns. It was one of our more confident picks of the week, as we see with the weighted pay right there. So that kind of got the recovery of the week kickstarted. On Sunday, we had a couple games. One of them was the 8 o'clock kickoff between the San Antonio Gunslingers and the Bay Area Panthers. This game, I don't think anybody saw coming, particularly from the viewpoint of Bay Area struggles, especially on offense. Joshua Jones, just 3 touchdown drives the whole game, and a span that in a game that featured 5 drives stalling out on 4th down for the Bay Area Panthers. It was a tough go. The Gunslingers had some struggles of their own on offense as well, but they were still able to get more than the Panthers were able to, and that is the name of the game. So despite being 7.5-point underdogs or 6.5-point underdogs, depending on book, the Gunslingers rise and get one of the best wins of the IFL season so far. That game ended 28-21, falling way below that 83.5 mark that we had set as the under. So that got us win number 2. The other Sunday game was a 6 o'clock kick between the Tucson Sugar Skulls and the defending IFL champion Arizona Rattlers. And Arizona, man, make no mistake, they are out for more. They won the IFL championship 53-16 and follow that up with an opening night performance of 56-28. The offense was relentless all game long. Dalton Snead accounting for 6 touchdowns, 4 passing and 2 rushing, while the Sugar Skulls just could not keep up. They had an admirable rally in the third quarter to get themselves back within 7. But at that point, Arizona said, that's enough. We're going to take lead from this point on. And that's precisely what they did, ending the game on a 21-0 run and getting their title defense started with a win. Last game that we had, Monday night, and a good one at that. The Vegas Nighthawks and San Diego Strike Force, 2 teams that should have some pretty explosive offenses throughout the season, and we got a very nice taste of that at Front Wave Arena on Monday night. The big story of this one, San Diego got off to a really good start. They scored on each of their first 7 possessions, held Vegas scoreless in each of their first 2 drives, and they were up 38-18 in the third quarter. But that's about as good as it got for the Strike Force, because Vegas, they just kept coming and coming and coming. Jerome Johnson showed why he was named the IFL MVP last year, engineering successful drive after successful drive. And with the help of some timely defense, the Nighthawks were able to complete the rally. They got a go-ahead touchdown on a crazy catch in the corner of the end zone from Quentin Randolph right around the 1-minute warning. That put them up by 7. They finally managed to get the game's first takeaway on an interception on Nate Davis late to seal away the win. Vegas starting 1-0 with the 48-41 come from behind victory over the Strike Force. The game got to 89 points. We needed at least 85 to be scored. So that wrapped up our third and final win of the week to bring us back to that even record. So it is now 8 of the last 9 regular season weeks where we have been 500 or better in the win-loss column. So we are 5-4 overall on the season. Most of our bets have been playing the totals. We've only done 1 money line bet and 3 spread bets to this point. But even in an early sample size, we're seeing kind of similar trends to what we did in 2024 and to some extent 2023 with success on the spread and over-under. So hopefully we're able to continue that here. So our parlay tracker, we see that last leg. That was the only heartbreaking part, aside from being a Strike Force fan, of the week that was before. We got Green Bay to win. We got Fishers to win. All San Diego had to do was cover at that 1.5 spread, and they had a 20-point lead vanish in less than a half of football. Definitely a tough way to lose one. But it feels like it was either going to be we get this parlay or we have to live with a losing record of 2-4. So fortunately, we were able to get one, but this one just happened to fall short. So we'll tee it up and try it again. That'll be at the back end of tonight's show, so stick around for that. Our year-to-date net gain and loss, it's not convincingly positive as of this point, but it is positive on both the flat and the weighted methods. The two methods kind of converging together a little bit after our weighted picks did a little bit better than our non-weighted picks in week 2. And our ROI, pretty much par for the course. We've gotten 5 picks right. We've returned, I believe, roughly just short of a unit. So hovering right around that 5% threshold on both methods. And I hope that continues to climb here in this next week to 3 weeks' time. So before I go into these yearly results by bet, I have tonight's special guest on the show to provide a little bit of perspective on the subject. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome in tonight's special guest. He is a fellow member of the Sports Coast to Coast Forum. You may know him by the username Sound of the Guns. He hails from San Antonio, Texas. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome in the one and only Mr. Ralph Judkins. Ralph, welcome into tonight's show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Alex. This is a exciting time. Second time being on the show now, so I'm getting a little bit of feel around the space and what it is you're doing. And we always like talking numbers. I actually am a math teacher by trade, and you have an advanced degree in mathematics and statistics, which is what allows you to present this just a plethora of information. It's almost overwhelming, but it's pretty clear, though, what you're trying to do, and you always go back to the results. we wanted to talk about, we talked in the offseason about the rule changes, that all 6 of the major rule changes all benefited the defense. And I wasn't sure going into this year what we were going to see. And I was just thinking, okay, well, maybe you're just going to take the under on every one of these. And the under's been pretty good so far, but it leads to another question. You want me to go ahead and tell the audience what my findings are so far? Or did you have something else you wanted to preface all this with?
The only thing that I'll preface it with is we mentioned how the under has been a relatively successful bet this year, currently standing at a 6-3 record. Should note though that there was a week 1 where we had all 3 games go under, which means that week 2 was actually an even split of 3-3. So could there be a changing of the tide coming?
As they say in investing, the trend is your friend, but we are trending away from the unders. And I think you could say fairly safely, the reason for that is execution. Right now, early days for most of these teams, it takes about 2 to 3 weeks for team cohesion to form and the execution level to go up to where it was. So that does favor the under. And the numbers that I have that I want to present tonight indicate that so far, but I'm looking more in the long-term perspective as we get in, Alec, more weeks and more reps. The number, I'll give you the target number and what you want to watch for. So we started a study, assisted by BJ Steffen of the Blizzard Fancast fame up in Wisconsin, started with a study looking at all of the games played post-COVID, 21 through 24. That was 456 games. The average score for each team, so it's basically the split score on a side, was 42.55. We'll call that 43. That's the target number to keep in mind this year to compare all games against, because that was the average before all the rule changes with a fairly large sample size. Standard deviation on that is almost 14 points. So it's a big, wide area that is typical with that 68% range, plus or minus 1 standard deviation. That's our starting point. Through week 2, only a 9-game sample size. And again, early days in the season, I'm not sure if the trend is going to hold here. In fact, the initial indication is that it won't. The average on those games so far, 36.7 or 37. That's a difference of 6 points. That's 1 whole touchdown for each team, 12 points a game, just basically 2 fewer scores. Looking at that as, okay, what is the likelihood or how does this rank up compared to that previous larger sample size of the previous 3 years? Well, the P-score, probability score of this being the outcome, is right around 33%. It's actually 32.49, slightly under the 33. So what we're saying here is, if you were to say these 9 games occurred last year, they would all be bottom third scoring games, but well within that -1 standard deviation to the left of the mean of 43. It's 1 touchdown away. You're not that far off. And so should we panic? Were the rules incredibly destructive? I think it really comes to the fan. My question to the fan is, and we're going to see what the fan thinks as they go along and in their comments, is the entertainment value that much less? Are you not entertained? Are 2 touchdowns less in a game enough for you to say, oh, this is not the indoor game, we need more scoring, it's not exciting? Okay. This is what we've seen so far. We've seen a 2 touchdown difference in the rules.
Yeah, definitely. And I remember we kind of addressed this question a little bit between the 2 of us last year as well, right? Where we were 3 weeks into the 3 weeks into the season, and we kind of had a similar thing happen, right? Obviously, the big thing last year was that in week 1 and week 2, there were 8 games. All 8 games went under, which is baffling, to be honest. But we had ended up determining that the average score through those 3 games or the 3 weeks to lead off 2024 was around 81 points, I think. The 2024 average ended up being 88.2, somewhere around that number.
So
So
that's
that
40,
harkens to that
44.1. Yep.
that execution point that you had mentioned before, right? Where, offenses are going to be able to eventually figure things out because they're should be used to playing against the defenses that they may have had experience with in the outdoor game as well.
Well, my look at that is my thesis for this entire year, or hypothesis for this entire year, rather, at this point, is this is the year of the head coach or the defensive coordinator, but someone has got to pick that person, because I really feel that the coach who can best adapt and scheme with these new rules to the greatest possible effect is going to be a coach that's going to be successful. As they are successful, other coaches will imitate what they're doing and it will level out. So initially, not surprised to see low scoring. As you said, Alec, last year, we did have a trend initially of lower, and then the reversion to mean rather, hit, and the scores went back up, and we were back closer to, again, the target that I mentioned was 43. We were at 44 points per team, 88 points being scored in a typical game. And I wanted to benchmark that, not to change the subject, against the NFL. The NFL last year played 544 games. That's slightly larger than the sample size I'm referring to, which was 456 games played before this year, 21 to 24. The points scored there per team was 22.5. Half, almost exactly, of the average in the IFL game. So if we view the 50-yard field as basically twice as easy to score on in terms of total offense, the numbers bear that out. So the logic is there. There seems to be some consistency. We're seeing year over year this thing about we start out low and then the over-under catches. I don't know if you can almost bet on that every year as an early aggressive move to make, because it seems to be the trend year over year that the odds makers are looking to the past as an indication of what the future is, which is what regression is. And that's, I'm sure, what they're modeling on. But we now know something, or we have discovered perhaps something as a group of bettors on the game, that in the early couple weeks, take the under, because the teams offensively are underperforming. And this year, perhaps especially, because there's so many new toys and so many new wrinkles that the offense has to pick up that a defense can now throw at them. And that's why the scores are also perhaps lower. And I'm curious if they're going to revert to that mean, or there will be a new mean established this year.
Yeah, that'll be one of the developing storylines that we're going to be finding out here in the next month or two.
So keep watching that target number of 43 and keep recalculating the average for the games as we're playing them, because that's an ongoing story for numbers nerds. And honestly, yeah, causation is not correlation, and we are not sure what is absolutely causing this, but we may have found something here that the odds makers have not considered, because they are stuck on large sample size and do not consider short-term effects that wash out in revision to mean.
Yeah, for sure. It's that constant battle between, modeling for the long term as well as maybe incorporating some recency bias there. So an constantly ongoing battle. So we've talked a little bit about the success of underdogs, both against the spread and outright. Spent some more time on game point totals. Another trend that stood out to me was the success of road teams thus far in the season. I know 9 games, small sample size, but what do you think about that, Ralph? 7-2 against the spread, 6-3 straight up. Is there some sort of maybe loss of advantage for home teams?
I think that what is more significant than the road team, the travel situation, it's always good for something, is that the other factors are so much larger. The contribution of being at home, and there are many significant advantages, are just being overwhelmed by all the new changes in the rules, and currently the fact that team cohesion isn't there. But I would say something to watch in the long term is I'm looking at the whole environment. I'm looking at my own team. My own team has a dedicated training facility. There are only two other teams that have anything even close to that. And that would be Las Vegas, and that would be in Arizona, with a facility that the teams can actually go into and practice in and play in and be comfortable in, as opposed to just the place they go to on game day to play. I think what we're going to see in the long term is teams that have those facilities are going to overperform compared to teams that don't. And it's also because, as a player, this is minor league sports. You are not exactly going to be staying in the best hotels. You are not being paid hundreds of thousands of dollars per game, or even tens of thousands of dollars per game. You are basically underpaid and working effectively for minimum wage in less than ideal conditions. So a typical, I don't know, Alec, have you talked about the conditions under which these athletes actually have to perform on your show?
Not much, to be honest.
Okay. So as you probably know, a rookie in this league makes $250 a week. That's only if they make the 21-man roster. You can be on the roster as one of the 25, but if you're part of the 4, you don't make any money that week. A veteran player makes a bonus of $100 more, $350 a week. That's if they play, and that's for an entire week's worth of work. So they're not making a lot of money in this league. So what are the other intangibles, the soft? How good's the hotel? How good's the place you are staying is one. How good are the meals? How good are the facilities? Where are the facilities? Because for a typical athlete in this game, they stay at a hotel negotiated for the best deal in the best interest of the owner. They travel with 2 or 3 other players to a local high school or a local college, and they practice on a 100-yard field, not the 50-yard field, not the actual dimensions. If you played the game, that matters a lot. Your routes, your coverage, your distances, everything. You can't really accurately duplicate that on a 100-yard field. Practice is over. You go back to your car, you're sweaty, you're tired. You then have to sit in that car again with 2 or 3 of your soon-to-be closest friends and go to wherever the physical therapy site is, wherever you're going to do your recovery. So you're driving to another part of town, and you do that. After that's over with, you drive to another part of town to wherever they have their meal voucher. That's all they get is a voucher, or in some cases, a cash allowance to go eat somewhere. Where do you want to eat today? Well, there are stories in the league where the team provided a 10-wing voucher at Hooters every single day. Once that's done, you go back to the hotel, and everyone crams into the one meeting room in the hotel. It's very hard to conduct separate meetings, let alone position meetings. And so you're working in that environment. You're at the hotel the rest of the time in a strange town, in a strange city. They may have a workout facility there. They may not. And then maybe you're going somewhere else to get a workout in. And then you're coming back, and then you're doing it all over again every single day. Then you travel, or you're at home, and you play the game. And they play it at a very high level. They try very, very hard. And these men are, for all intents and purposes, superheroes, because they go through this season that I described on the daily for the money that they receive, and they put on the uniform, step out onto that field, and do things that 1 in 10,000 human beings could never do for an entire game. They're superheroes, and this is why you should admire these players. But I say all this for the better. Look at San Antonio. Look at Phoenix. Well, now Glendale. Look at Arizona, and look at Vegas. These are programs that are currently on the rise right now. And, I mean, we talked earlier, Arizona is right now looking like a repeater. The last team to repeat was the incredibly long run by the Sioux Falls Storm. We haven't had a repeater. Right. In fact, the last few years, the teams that have won have been out of nowhere, starting with Northern Arizona. They were picked to not do anything. So it gets to my point, Alec, that I, as a bettor, You've got to break your habit of saying, oh, that team's never any good, Quad City. That team always wins. You got to be careful. You've got to be careful, and you've got to look at the numbers. And as always, separate your emotion from the issue, separate your feelings from the issue, or don't bet your money, because you're going to lose if you take shortcuts and say, well, that team's good, so I like that. That team's not so good, and they've never been good, so they're never going to win. And I like my home team always and all the time. Enjoy losing money, because that's what all you're going to have to enjoy if that is the extent and depth of your preparation. And definitely watch Alex's show.
Much appreciated. You make a lot of really good points there, and it really puts into perspective, like, who are these guys that are going out on that field every Friday or Saturday? Like, the level of preparation that goes in to, just doing anything throughout the season, it doesn't really get much appreciation if you don't really think about it long enough. And you
Right.
mentioned, the teams that have these dedicated facilities, right? Vegas, Arizona. It should be no coincidence that they are right now the top 1 and top 2 teams in the week 3 coaches poll. With San Antonio on the rise as well.
I haven't seen that coaches poll. I'll be curious to see how San Antonio did defeating the number 3 team from the number 11 position, how many positions we moved up. I'm just saying, long term, what is going to happen for the teams that don't have facilities? Their ownership has to be happy with what they have until they're willing to make that investment. Get used to losing. And that's not a comfortable place, because you start losing your fan base, and it affects revenue. And this is the big difference between this league and, we'll say, the league, the NFL. The NFL, every team is on a level playing field in the sense that they all have training facilities. They all have rehab and conditioning. They all have doctors and therapists at every single practice if something goes wrong, because they have to report the status on all their athletes. That is not the case in the IFL, and that's what makes betting different here. And you need to be looking at any factor you can grab onto that might make a difference. And following Alex's advice, hey, at least he's not losing money. And that is actually an accomplishment.
Sometimes.
Now you're not. And last year you were slightly under or slightly over. I mean,
I was actually pretty deep in a hole last year in 2024. But then I, from the last 6 weeks of the season on, made a crazy run. Ended up a few games above 500, but I ended up losing like $10 overall because I took a bunch of heavy favorites on the money line.
Well, and there will be those games. There will be those games that everyone can make good on, that is so predictable that it's, okay, I'm betting on the sun setting today kind of situations. Yeah. There'll be those. There'll be a chance to get back. There'll be get back games. But I'm just saying, for a trend to watch that 43 number, see if we, after the third week, after this week, in fact, as we get, some teams have played 3 games, some teams have played 2, as we get to the point where everyone's played 3 or more games, see how close we get reverting back to that mean of 43, or whether we stay under it. Take a look, and if it's a 50-50 toss up in your mind, who has the better facilities? Who has the better other things? I mean, I was actually surprised that there was something surprising to me in the Bay Area game. Just before the Bay Area game was played, the Panthers put out a graphic showing 14 coaches, including their head coach, on the screen. They named, I want to say, 8 of them by particular position. And they were going up against a team with 4 coaches. I would think that if you had that many coaches watching that many aspects of the game, replays, positions, all that, you would have a competitive advantage. But Bay Area didn't make good on it yet. That could be something to watch. Take a look at the number of coaches that are available. If there's a lot more eyes on things, you can see a lot more things, but you have to coordinate those things. And I don't think Bay Area was able to leverage the advantage that Coach Keefe had. I mean, you got Keefe, you've got Moss in the top two positions. How many more top flight coach do you want? And they're getting data fed to them from a whole bunch of different sources. Eventually, I think they're going to find a way to make that pay. So I'm kind of bullish on Bay Area mid to late season if they're in a 50-50 situation where you're not sure, that's a reason to pick Bay Area or pick the result that you expect from a Bay Area team.
Yeah, certainly. It raises the question at which point do you have too many eyes versus maybe not enough eyes?
If you can't coordinate all that input, if you cannot channel it properly to give you the information you need to make it the right decision point, Alex, certainly it can become a distraction. If all those coaches are yelling in the two top coaches' ears the whole time, it's going to be a nuisance, and they're going to have to shut people down because there was no efficiency gained. You obviously, law of diminishing return, the more coaches, the less you can get. But technology fights against that, making everyone more efficient and coordinating that experience more efficiently. And it's going to be up to the top coaches, Keefe especially, as well as Moss, to say, okay, if we have these coaches and they're all assigned one thing, we need to tell them trigger points. Speak up when you see this. Speak up when you see that. When this set comes in from the other team, because you've got enough people to watch the other bench. You've got enough people to spend time looking over there and seeing what's going on. You see a player throw up in the bench area? That might affect the next matchup just a little bit. It's just things like that we as fans, we're watching the game. We're watching the ball. The coaches shouldn't all be watching the same thing the fans are. In fact, very little should be watched by them. And gosh, go back with a super clear image we get in the IFL Network feed. Go back and see those images where you can. Don't look at the ball. Don't look at the field. Look at the body language of the coaches. If they show the bench area, look at the body language in the bench area. Look for signs of technology. Are there a bunch of pads? Are they being used? And you saw that in the Bay Area game. I did a separate feed of it, and I commented that you could tell by the body language that all the Bay Area Panther players were kind of looking down. Well, okay, maybe they're feeling sad and depressed, or maybe they have that many pads with that many different feeds over in their area. And that's going to be something that eventually, when they figure out how to leverage that, look out. Bay Area players are going to be informed. They're going to be getting information from all those different sources, and they're going to put it to use, and it's going to create a competitive advantage. And teams that don't have that will not do as well against teams that do, just like the facilities argument. So look for those things.
Yeah, some fantastic insight. Appreciate
I
you
don't
sharing
know.
it.
I love the numbers too. I love the numbers too, but the numbers don't play the game. There are always soft factors.
They don't tell the whole story. They tell a very compelling story at times.
Yes.
But as you've clearly demonstrated here, there's a lot more other pieces to it that should definitely be considered when, previewing and predicting these games. So with that, I'm going to move on with my presentation here. I want to thank Ralph for sharing some of his thoughts, wisdom, and experience. Thank you, Ralph.
It's been fun. Looking forward to revisiting this mean and the story about the new defense later on in the season. And best of luck to you and all of the very wise and very smart bettors that follow your show, Alec.
I appreciate it, Ralph. Thank you. So there you have it, folks. That was Ralph Judkins sharing some amazing input. As we move forward here with the team-by-team trends, it's still mostly just 2024 info to this point. The question being, how can we leverage these stats to inform some of our selections, both in the immediate and the long-term future? So things like Bay Area, they've gone 13-4 to the under, for example, in their last 17 games. So trends like that might be something that we look to when crafting up these picks. And our result tracker by team, we have one win for 10 of the 16 teams in the league, or 14 teams rather, in the league so far. Again, our preseason goal that we had established was 7 wins for every team. So the more that we can get done with those in the early going, the more feasible that goal will be as we near season's end. So now it's time for some disclaimers here. Lines and odds will come from DraftKings Sportsbook in the event that they are unavailable. I will fill in those with FanDuel odds. I know the past couple weeks, DraftKings has been very late, or at least later than they've typically been, with putting their lines online. In fact, the lines that they did have for week 3 just came out literally 3 minutes before I went live today. So a little bit of inconvenient timing, but they are up nonetheless. So we'll still use DraftKings for today. This series is purely for entertainment and curiosity purposes. It's not meant to be like this future telling thing, nor is it meant to be a money-making tool. After all, there's no such thing as a lock in the sports wagering world. You're more than welcome to tail my bets if you do decide to play, but please do so responsibly. You must be 21 years or older to play in most jurisdictions, and I implore you to practice safe gaming habits. Set a budget, money, and time. Risk only what you can afford to lose. If you feel like you're on a slippery slope when it comes to problem gaming, there's a lot of resources online that can help out with that. Haveagameplan.org is a good example of one of those. But there are several others out there to explore as well if you're kind of in that territory. And with that, it is time to dive into our picks for week 3 of the season. So here we go. A lot of really good games on the docket today. You can see that all of them have point spreads underneath a field goal, which is extremely rare. But we'll see how we dive into this here. First game is tomorrow at 7 p.m. The Tulsa Oilers travel to the suburbs of Indy to take on the Fishers Freight in their first ever home game. The Freight are giving 1.5 to the Oilers. The over-under is 82.5. Tulsa minus 120 on the money line, and Fishers paying even money for an outright win. I am really looking forward to the way that this game pans out because these are two very proud, very tough defenses. You have Marvin Jones and the Oilers, Dixie Wooten and the Freight, and they got to 1-0 at this point in the season, largely because of those defenses. The Oilers surrendered just 20 points in their road win over the Gunslingers, and the Freight only surrendered 8 second-half points in their victory over the Northern Arizona Wranglers last week. As I thought about this game, I kind of went through position by position, and I came to a realization that in terms of rushing upside from the quarterback position, TJ Edwards and Jaya Wright is going to be a very intriguing battle. No doubt about it. What I ended up favoring, though, was the upside that Edwards has in the passing game, particularly with downfield accuracy, that Jaya Wright didn't really have to do a whole lot of in the early going in last week's game. And to some extent, his time as Sioux Falls starting quarterback a season ago. So in a game that's probably going to be one of those battering, bruising, 3-yard and cloud of dust sort of games, my advantage here is actually going to go to the Tulsa Oilers. I just like Edwards a little bit more than Wright at the moment as the more complete quarterback. And in a game where you're going to need every advantage that you can get going up against these tough defenses, that may be the difference that gets Tulsa over the top. Fishers, they absolutely can compete, but it's going to take more than one win against a Northern Arizona team that's ranked 14th in the coaches poll right now to move the needle that much more for me. Might my outlook on the freight change in a couple weeks? Probably. But for this game, I'm going to stick with the Oilers. It's a minus 120 money line. We could play the spread as well, but I just have heebie-jeebies about taking 1.5 point spreads and that team winning the game by 1. So we'll buy the extra point. We'll make it an outright win. Tulsa Oilers minus 120 money line. Saturday's game will be a good one. We have the Quad City Steamwheelers and the Iowa Barnstormers. This will be the home opener for Iowa, giving 2 in the hook to the Quad City Steamwheelers. The over-under set at 81.5. Money line is Quad City minus 125 and Iowa plus 105. This series was an anthology of instant classics last year. There were 3 games determined by a combined 5 points. Quad City won 1 by 2. Iowa won 1 by 2. And then Iowa won the third game in that series by 1 point. So whenever these two teams get together, they have that rivalry feel to it where this game is probably going to come down to a field goal right at the very end or an extra point, something along those lines. And I thought about this game a little bit. I gravitated towards the point total for this game. And when I had done my initial analysis, the lines were up on FanDuel. But now that they are up on DraftKings, there's one bet here that I love so much more than I did before. That is the over at 81.5. I still have questions about the validity of the Iowa Barnstormers defense. They were about a 50-plus point against per team last year. They gave up 52 to the Green Bay Blizzard last week. That's something that Quad City could potentially take advantage of. Daquan Neal, a former Barnstormer himself, could have a field day on this team. And as we saw last week, Iowa, with Joaquin Collazo III and Keon Williams, they carry some pretty explosive ability as well. There were 2 of the 3 games in this series last season that got to 100 points. Even if we get 90 here, which I believe this game does, this bet should hold up as one of the better bets of the week. So give me Quad City and Iowa going over 81.5. Iowa is 11-6 to the over in their last 17 games as well. So a very viable pick. Arizona at Green Bay. This game will lead off Sunday's action in a playing out of what could have been last year's IFL championship game. So for those disappointed in last August's result, you'll have an opportunity to see how that maybe hypothetically would have played out. Arizona's on the road. They are favored by 2.5. Over-under is 81 in the hook. Arizona is minus 125 money line, and Green Bay is plus 105 money line. So basically identical to Quad City and Iowa. And Arizona, they looked dang good on Sunday. Granted, it was against a Tucson team that is projected maybe not to make as much noise this year, but you can only play the hand that you're dealt, and Arizona did that to a T last Sunday with that 28-point win over the Sugar Skulls, where every part of their game was working. Dalton Sneed, 6 total touchdowns. Defense came up with 2 or 3 really key takeaways in that game. And right now, they just look unbeatable right now. It'll be a stiff test going on the road against a Green Bay team that was a 13-win team a season ago. They seem to get things back on track a little bit, even though Iowa came back a little bit in last Friday's game with the Barnstormers. But point is, they got the job done. and they got the win. This should be a really, really good contest. And this is where I'm going to make my second over pick of the week. So we're going against the trend a little bit here with unders ruling the day so far. But I feel like these point totals are just a bit too low at this point, particularly for two high upside offensive teams as Arizona and Green Bay. Dalton Snead offenses in the past 3 years have been about the most efficient offenses that this league has seen. In Green Bay, much of the same. They take care of the ball really well. Max Myler, terrific dual threat quarterback. I think we end up seeing another game that could easily eclipse 90 here. The defenses, don't get me wrong, the defenses are really good, but I feel like the offenses can challenge them in this one. It should be a fantastic game between two teams that could meet each other in the playoffs. Who knows? But we are going to go with more than 81.5 in Arizona versus Green Bay. Our 6:05 game is the home opener for the Jacksonville Sharks down in Duval. They will host the Vegas Nighthawks, who are favored by 2.5. The over-under 81.5, and Vegas minus 125 money line, Sharks plus 105 money line. So in a really weird twist, we have 3 games where in all 3 the road team's favored by 2.5. The over-under is 81.5, and the money line distributions are the exact same. Is my pick going to be the exact same here with the over? Spoiler alert, it is not. We saw what Vegas did last week, right? Jerome Johnson kind of struggled out of the gate, but then ran a heater. 20-point rally to beat the San Diego Strike Force late in the second half of Monday night's game. They do come into this game on just 6 days of rest, whereas Jacksonville will be off a bye week. So there is the battle between rest versus rust to consider. But I'll be honest, this is one of the toughest games that I'm making a selection on this week. And that a lot of that has to do with the fact that Jacksonville has been one of the most impressive teams in the IFL. If you factor in the last 4 weeks of this season or last season and the first game of this season, the Caleb Barker era Jacksonville Sharks are 5-0 against the spread, 4-1 outright, and they still haven't been a favorite in any IFL game in their franchise history, which is wild. This is 18 in a row where they are the underdogs. I'm suspecting that streak's probably going to come to an end next week, mercifully for the Sharks fans. They deserve it. But my pick here, in a strange twist, is not going to be that streak continuing. I'm taking the Nighthawks to cover on this one. Look, if you are a team and you're down by 20 late in the game and you can rally and win that game by 7, you are not out of any spread bet where you're less than a touchdown favorite. Vegas, they were the number 1 team in the coaches poll to start off the season. They did drop down to number 2 in favor of Arizona. Jacksonville, number 4 in that power ranking as well. But I do like this number. Vegas, by 2.5, we get a favorite spread below the key number of 3. So might that matter in a scenario with Vegas where they did have kicking struggles in their game on Monday night? Will that even matter, though? Not 100% sure. But Vegas won this matchup last year, won by 6 points, won by 26 points. Granted, that was before Caleb Barker had joined Jacksonville. But I do like the idea of Vegas getting to a 2-0 start, extremely energized from that rally in San Diego. So Vegas minus 2.5 is my play. And to cap off Sunday slate, as well as the week 3 slate, Battle of California between two teams that are 0-1. This is going to be fun. San Diego, Bay Area. Interestingly, Bay Area, the only home team that is favored this week. They are laying 2.5, over under 83 in the hook. Money line is San Diego plus 105, Bay Area minus 125. I'm tempted to take Bay Area unders here because they have been a biblically accurate pick in the past couple years. But there's another direction that I'm going to go with this. We saw this series play out a bunch last season. 5 times, as a matter of fact. 4 regular season matchups and that postseason clash in the first round. What I found when reviewing those results is a trend that is staggering. And here's what it is. The underdog in that game, in those series of games, perfect 5-0 against the spread. Outright winning each of those last 3 contests. So being the favorite here may not necessarily be a good thing. And as Ralph suggested in the earlier segment that we had, they may be still trying to figure things out with, player and coaching personnel. So they're going to have a short turnaround. Both teams are really going to have a short turnaround following disappointing opening game losses. But here is where I take my first underdog money line bet and back San Diego for the outright win. I think this team is angry about what happened on Monday night, surrendering that lead to the Nighthawks. Coach Taylor Jenniser, terrific head coach in terms of game-by-game adjustments, particularly following a loss. The Strike Force seemingly were the masters of losing games by 1 or 2 points a season ago. But anytime that they did, they were able to march right back and win the next game or 2 or 3. So I do like the feasibility of a response game here from San Diego. And the Panthers, they suddenly have more questions than answers, particularly on offense. Of course, last week may have just been a 1-game aberration as far as Josh Jones in the offense goes, but we'll take a little bit of a roll of a dice with this one. It's an evenly matched game nonetheless, but let's stick with the trend of the road team dominance and take San Diego for an outright win. And now to put together my 3-leg parlay of the week to wrap things up here tonight so we can get on the heck out of here. I started this thing off with Quad City minus 125 on the money line. Not an easy pick for me to make, mainly because the home team in this series has won each of the last 5 games dating back to 2023, which should point to value on taking Iowa on the money line, or maybe Iowa plus 2.5. Here's what swayed my decision in favor of Quad City, though. The Steamwheelers have a much more optimistic outlook, at least from the coaches poll, than Iowa does. Quad City ranked 3rd in that power ranking, whereas Iowa's ranked 12th. My model also has the Steamwheelers winning this game about 65% of the time, which, when paired with minus 125 odds, presents enormous statistical value there. So that is my first pick, getting Quad City with the road win against Iowa to improve their record to 3-0 as the first IFL team to get to 3 wins. Second leg, Arizona Green Bay. I'm going Rattlers money line. I know how strong Green Bay has been at home, But I think that gets trumped by the fact that Arizona lifetime against Green Bay, a perfect 7-0. And honestly, how can you bet against them with the way that they are playing football right now? Minus 125 might be the longest odds that we get on any Arizona Rattlers straight up bet this season. Barring any significant injury or roster turnover, this might be the best value that we get when it comes to a bet involving the Arizona Rattlers. So that pair of minus 125 picks is the backbone of the parlay. And the third leg to top everything off, if we get that far, I mentioned it before, and I'm going to put it right here. The Bay Area, San Diego, under 83.5. This pick in the past 17 games for the Bay Area Panthers, or the past 18, I should say, the under has cashed 13 times, proving time and again to be a super reliable option. So we've taken advantage of that a lot in the single game betting. I think it's time that we capitalize on it on our 3-leg parlay. So San Diego Bay Area under 83.5. That was actually 81.5 over at FanDuel earlier today. So we're getting a couple of extra points of wiggle room for free there. The odds of this parlay are plus 518, which means that if we put $10 on this and all 3 legs hit, we're going to be able to take home $61.85 as our total payout. So a very attractive series of wagers here for 3 outcomes that on their own could very realistically happen. And let's be honest, we deserve a little bit of a break following the way that week two's parlay shook out. So that is the 3-leg parlay. I'm going to go Quad City money line on Saturday, early Sunday game Arizona money line, late Sunday game Bay Area San Diego, under 83.5, pays better than 5-1. And those are my selections for week 18, or not week 18, what am I talking about? For week 3 of the 2025 IFL season. So that's going to wrap it up for tonight's show. Thank you once again for tuning in. If you do try out some bets this week, I wish you the best of luck. I'll see you